The episode begins with Mark checks on Petey in the bathroom. Petey says he just slipped, then checks to make sure no one can see in. Mark tells him that the neighborhood is mostly empty, except for Mrs. Selvig next door. Petey has a memory of working with Irving, Mark, and Dylan. He suddenly finds himself back in the basement with Mark. Petey says he gets confused sometimes. Mark asks what Sunset Park is, but Petey doesn't know. Mrs. Selvig/Coble is sitting in her kitchen, staring out the window. Petey explains that he has trouble telling which memories are real, but they said it would get better. Mark asks who they are, and Petey says they know Severance is wrong and are working to fix it. Petey tells Mark that it's not the WMC doing it, it's someone else. Mark asks what Petey wants from him. Petey wonders if Mark is curious about what he's doing down there. Mark says he'll never unsever. Petey says he found a secret department where people can never leave, and they're still there now. Petey doesn't want to talk more, in case someone is listening. Petey asks where June is, then gets a headache and apologizes. He says June is his daughter. Mrs. Selvig/Coble is watching Mark from her window, wondering if he's okay. Mark watches a news story about a severed woman who got pregnant at work. Natalie, a Lumen rep, defends the severance procedure. Mark changes the channel and falls asleep in front of the TV. The next morning, Mark wakes up Petey in the basement. Mark says he's going to work and tells Petey to stay. Mark talks about his wife who died in a car crash a few years ago and says Severance helps him cope. Petey mentions that sometimes Mark came in with red eyes at work. Mark says he'll be back at 6 and tells Petey to eat whatever he wants. Mark heads out. Mrs. Selvig is de-icing her stoop with a hairdryer. Mark thanks her for the cookies. At work, Mark puts his things in his locker and goes downstairs. He gets a green envelope with new work photos, one for each person. Helly tells Mark that she deleted the scary numbers. Mark asks when, and the others say he was gone yesterday. Helly announces that she's resigned and assures Mark it's a good thing. Milchick arrives, telling Mark that his Audi was upset about missing work. Milchick tells Mark to make his first announcement as department head. Milchick takes photos while Mark makes the announcement. He tells everyone that Helly's resignation request was denied. Helly runs off, upset. Rickon and Devon arrive at Mark's house and leave a package outside. Mrs. Selvig/Coble walks to Mark's door and picks up the package. Petey keeps writing in the basement and has a flashback of Mark asking him what he's drawing. Mrs. Selvig/Coble enters Mark's house with a key and goes down to the basement. No one is there. She smells one of Gemma's candles and puts it in her purse. Her cell phone rings, and she answers. Petey, hiding, sees who it is and has flashbacks to Ms. Coble at work. Ms. Coble talks to Milchick about Helly and then heads off to work. Petey watches her from the bushes and has a hallucination of walking down a hallway, looking at his map of the department. Mark checks on Helly, who has locked herself in the bathroom for 45 minutes. He warns her he's coming in. She's writing notes on her skin, like, "Let me out." He thought she was doing well. Helly says the numbers scared her. He tells her to wash her arms and leaves. Irving worries about Helly and says she needs Mark's help. He suggests showing her the perpetuity wing. Ms. Coble arrives and gives Milchick a package to open. It's Rickon's new book on self-actualization. Mark meets with Ms. Coble and says Helly should see the perpetuity wing. Ms. Coble asks if Mark has filled out a slip. Mark mentions how strange it's been since Petey left. Ms. Coble throws her mug at him, says it's for his own good, and sends him on his way. Dylan and Irving talk about muscle shows. Helly writes a note, a cry for help, on a bingo card and rolls it into a Sharpie lid. She tapes it up and grabs a drink, about to swallow it. Mark tells Helly the code detectors can read letters even inside the body, and if she swallows it, Milchick will extract it. Helly spits the lid into his hand. He tells her to shut down her workstation. They are taking a trip. The macrodata team walks down the hall. Irving talks about the Lumen CEOs, who all come from the same family. Dylan gives Helly Egan Bingo to keep her entertained. They run into Bert and a woman from optics and design. Dylan is surprised to see them out of their hole. The woman from O&D says it's an egg drop challenge to keep their synergy up. Mark introduces Helly and says they are going to the perpetuity wing. Bert and the woman leave. Irving watches them longingly. Ms. Coble returns to her office. Milchick and Natalie, the Lumen rep, are there. Natalie says this meeting is about Petey, and the board is joining them. After a moment of silence, Natalie tells Ms. Coble to speak first. Ms. Coble says the search for Kilmer, Petey, continues, but there were signs of reintegration before his departure. Natalie gets an update from the board. She tells Ms. Coble that Severance is irreversible. Ms. Coble says her team is working hard to meet the deadline. Natalie interrupts and says the board has ended the call. Irving tells Helly that O&D is a two-person department. Dylan says the macrodata department is clever, but O&D is more cruel. Helly asks how many departments there are, but no one knows. Dylan says O&D tried a violent coup decades ago. Irving insists that's a lie and no one killed anyone, but that's why the departments are kept apart. Helly jokes about killing Mark to make a statement. Mark laughs it off. They reach the perpetuity wing. Irving opens the door to reveal a lifelike statue of James Egan, the current Lumen CEO. Irving explains the displays are for the CEOs, but the back part is for Keir Egan, the founder. Petey, still in his bathrobe, walks down the road, confused. Helly looks at the first female CEO, Myrtle Egan. She secretly crosses off a bingo square. Irving admires Myrtle, explaining that she decided at age 7 to become the first female CEO of Lumen. Helly says she wishes she could remember her childhood. Irving takes Helly into a room with photos of teeth on the walls. He says Lumen has been helping humanity since 1866. Irving and Mark say it's noble. Dylan wants to leave, but Helly wants to see the Keir Egan part. Inside is a perfect replica of Keir Egan's house. In Keir Egan's bedroom, Irving discovers that the others have been playing bingo. He scolds Mark for perverting their founder's message when Helly needs meaning. Mark says he never wanted to be department head. The three realize Helly is gone. Mark runs off to find her. Helly is running through the halls. Mark follows her. Milchick reads Rickon's book. Helly tries to escape through the stairwell but finds the door locked. She grabs a fire extinguisher and breaks the window. The red lights flash, and sirens sound. She tries to get the note that says, "Never come back here," out the narrow window. She cuts her arm on the glass. Mark catches up and pulls her away from the door. Mr. Grainer appears and asks Helly to come with him. Mr. Grainer takes Helly to the break room. Milchick is already waiting. Milchick treats Helly's arm. He's disappointed to see her there. Helly tries to reason with him, but he refuses to listen. Milchick asks her to sit at a table with a microphone, projector, tape recorder, and a polygraph. Milchick insists Helly read the statement. She doesn't want to. He tells her to do it again. He checks the graph. Ms. Coble shakes her head. Milchick asks her to read it again. Dylan leaves, turning off the lights, leaving Mark alone. Mark replaces the old team photos with new ones of Petey. When he removes the last one, he finds a hand-drawn map of the department. Petey, with a bloody nose and hands, stumbles through a gas station. He yells at the worker for tokens so he can eat. Mark goes to the elevator and leaves the empty Lumen building. It's raining outside, and the sky is dark. Mark goes to the basement to check on Petey, but he isn't there. Mark drives around looking for Petey. He sees an ambulance and follows it. He arrives at the gas station and sees EMTs leading a bloody-faced Petey out. Petey looks up at Mark, then collapses. The EMTs start working on him. Mark watches, stunned, and then leaves. Mark goes home, still shocked. He clears out the basement, putting everything back the way it was. He turns off the lights and goes upstairs. He hears a buzzing sound and notices a cell phone ringing in the basement. Stay tuned for more amazing recaps.